Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're diving into a topic that might just make your skin crawl and your brain tingle. You know, we cover some weird stuff on this show, but this episode, it's one of those that might just get you looking over your shoulder tonight. We're talking about Lilith, the dark feminine, the stuff of nightmares, and possibly a little closer to home than you'd expect. So here's the deal. Is Lilith an ancient, otherworldly entity, or is she something even stranger, a kind of primal energy lingering in the shadows of our psyche? Lilith is an old name in myth, a figure who defies easy explanation. Some say she's Adam's first wife, tossed out of Eden for daring to want a little equality. Others claim she's a demon, a force that has haunted humanity for centuries. But today, Lilith is something of an occult icon, a symbol of rebellion, independence, and yes, a little dark power. And she's been turning up a lot lately, maybe even knocking on a few doors, including my own. But here's the deal. I'm not just talking theory here. I'm sharing some of my own experiences. I know it sounds a little wild, but strange things have happened around me that I can't chalk up to just coincidence. And trust me, when you wake up in the dead of night with an owl hooting outside your window when it's never hooted before, you start to wonder if something or someone is watching. You may want to stop the episode here and read about my encounter on the Broadcasting Seed Substack. I will put the link in the show notes. So, in today's episode, we're digging into Lilith's backstory, her archetypal and paranormal connections, and some downright eerie personal experiences mentioned above that might just make you question what you know about myth and reality. Strap in, folks. This one's going to be a ride. All right, let's plant some seeds. Alright, let's kick things off by setting the stage. Who exactly is Lilith? To understand the Lilith we're dealing with today, we need to go way back. I'm talking Mesopotamia, folks, a place where people really understood how to create the stuff of nightmares. Lilith makes her first appearance as a figure called Lilitu in these ancient texts. She was feared as a demoness, a creature who preyed on children and seduced men. From the get-go, she was a figure of independence, but also danger, a woman who didn't play by society's rules. Fast forward a few centuries, and Lilith's story really takes shape in Jewish folklore, particularly in the alphabet of Ben Sira, a text from the early Middle Ages. Here, Lilith is introduced as the first wife of Adam. The story goes that when Adam and Lilith were created, Lilith wasn't exactly keen on being submissive. She wanted equality. She wanted to be on top, quite literally. But when Adam insisted otherwise, Lilith said, "See ya," and left Eden entirely, refusing to bow to anyone, even God. That's when she became a dark, exiled figure wandering the world and eventually taking on demonic traits. Now let's pause here. Think about what that represents. Lilith wasn't kicked out for stealing, lying, or any of the usual sins. Her crime was insisting on autonomy. That alone makes her one of the most rebellious figures in ancient lore, especially in a society that valued conformity. She wasn't just rebelling against Adam. She was rejecting the whole setup. Over time, Lilith's role grew darker. She was said to haunt the night, seducing men, taking vengeance on the children of Adam and Eve, and embodying primal desires and fears. Lilith's reputation spread, and she became associated with everything from infant mortality to sexual temptation. But despite her ominous image, Lilith also became a symbol of defiance, a dark but seductive power that challenges the status quo. And here's where it starts to get personal. It's easy to dismiss Lilith as a relic of the past. An old bedtime story used to scare people into submission, but when you've actually had experiences that echo these ancient tales, it stops feeling like folklore and starts feeling real. Stay with me, because next we'll explore the ways Lilith's story continues to haunt modern times, from her influence on occult practices to the paranormal sightings that are hard to ignore. So we've got Lilith's origin story, powerful, rebellious, and dark. But here's where things get even weirder. In modern times, Lilith isn't just an ancient demon tucked away in old texts. She's very much alive in the collective imagination, especially in paranormal circles. But is she an actual entity, or is she an archetype? A powerful symbol that taps into our deepest fears and desires. Let's look at this from both angles. Lilith as an entity suggests she's a real presence, potentially able to interact with people. There's no shortage of stories out there of people claiming to have seen her or felt her energy. And in my experience, well, let's just say there have been moments when it felt like something was actively watching me, a cold, unsettling presence, especially during late-night encounters. We're talking about an owl hooting at the exact moment a Lilith-themed podcast plays on loop, in a place where owls don't typically hang around. The other angle is Lilith as an archetype, a figure embedded in the subconscious. Carl Jung would argue that figures like Lilith represent aspects of our psyche, particularly the shadow self, repressed desires, fears, and darker impulses that we'd rather keep buried. The more you dig into Lilith's story, the more it feels like she's not just lurking in dark corners of the forest, but also in the dark corners of our minds. If you've ever felt drawn to defy norms or push against the grain, you're tapping into that Lilith energy, consciously or not. So, which is it? Entity or archetype? Maybe it's both. Lilith has a way of blending the real and the symbolic, showing up in our lives in ways that are hard to ignore. And if my own encounters are any indication, she's a force that challenges us to confront things we'd rather not face. Whether she's real or imagined, Lilith has become a modern icon for those exploring the boundaries of the paranormal, occult, and shadow work. Now, this is where things get personal. We've covered Lilith as a historical figure and a modern paranormal presence. But what about Lilith as a force within personal trauma? My experiences with her have a way of digging up past wounds, particularly those connected to darker memories and emotions. It's almost as if Lilith's presence is an invitation or a challenge to confront those hidden scars. In many spiritual traditions, encounters with dark energies are considered a form of spiritual warfare, testing resilience and faith. When I had a nightmare involving a Lilith-like figure, where she seemed to embody past traumas, it was more than just a bad dream. Waking up at exactly 3:49 a.m., haunted by a familiar dread, felt like a direct confrontation with a part of my past I'd rather not revisit. The timing, the intensity. It was all too specific, too powerful to ignore. In spiritual warfare, the dark feminine archetype, represented by figures like Lilith, is often seen as a disruptor, a force that brings the unseen to light and forces confrontation. While she might embody fear and temptation and myths in real life, her presence can compel us to confront the hidden aspects of our own stories. For me, these encounters felt like a summons to face unresolved trauma head on. What's fascinating is that in the process, I didn't just experience fear, I also felt a strange sense of empowerment. By naming, acknowledging, and rebuking this presence, it felt like reclaiming ground, standing up to something that's been lurking in the shadows for too long. It's as if facing Lilith's energy, even in fear, was a way to reclaim a piece of my past. Lilith has made quite the comeback lately, not just as an ancient demoness or a nighttime menace, but as a symbol in modern occult practices and even popular culture. Today, Lilith represents something more complex, a figure for those seeking to reclaim power, independence, and those darker aspects of femininity that don't conform to polite society. In various occult circles, Lilith is embraced as a goddess of freedom, representing liberation from social constraints. She's seen as a figure who owns her desires, defies authority, and, frankly, does things her own way. This modern Lilith isn't just about fear or rebellion, but about empowerment and self-actualization, especially for those drawn to shadow work and the deeper, less comfortable aspects of themselves. So, what draws people to Lilith? Perhaps it's the sense that society often suppresses darker impulses, rage, defiance, independence that don't align with traditional ideals. By embracing Lilith, people are tapping into a part of themselves that isn't afraid to be unconventional. But this connection isn't just philosophical. For some, it feels almost spiritual. Practitioners report feeling her presence or sensing her energy during rituals, as if Lilith is more than just an idea but a force that can be called upon. For me, these modern interpretations bring up mixed feelings. On one hand, Lilith represents a source of strength and defiance. On the other, there's a sense that her energy is not something to be taken lightly. My own encounters felt like a warning. A reminder that tapping into the dark feminine, whether as a real entity or an archetype, has its consequences. Lilith might offer empowerment, but she also demands respect. Let's talk about the 3:49 a.m. wake-up call, the moment that jolted me awake with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. In the supernatural and paranormal realm, there's a lot of speculation around early morning hours, often called the witching hour or the devil's hour. These times are said to be when the veil between worlds is thinnest, making it easier for entities to interact with us. For me, waking up at precisely 3:49 a.m. felt too specific to ignore. I was compelled to open up Genesis 3:4-9 in the Bible, as if something was nudging me toward it. And these verses, they're loaded. They touch on deception, temptation, and the very moment humanity fell from grace. Lilith, often associated with defiance and rebellion, fits into this theme of challenging the divine order. It was like the universe was throwing a reminder that confronting dark forces is about recognizing their impact on our lives, both symbolically and literally. Looking back, the time, the owl, and even the scripture felt like clues guiding me through a spiritual struggle I hadn't fully acknowledged. Whether Lilith is a real entity or a powerful archetype, her presence isn't about simple fear. It's a wake-up call to confront what we'd rather keep hidden. And maybe that's the message here. There are parts of ourselves we need to face if we're going to find peace. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode of Broadcasting Seeds. Today, we dove deep into Lilith, a figure that's part ancient demoness, part modern icon of empowerment, and maybe something more. We've explored her as an entity, an archetype, and even as a personal experience. Whether you see Lilith as a myth or a real force, encounters like these remind us of the power in facing our shadows. If this episode got you thinking, maybe even questioning, do me a favor, like, share, and leave a review. Your support helps us keep planting seeds in curious minds everywhere. And as always, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, there's always more to the story. Until next time.
Got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe all my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they fill in the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading